So right out of the gate, this is going to be spoiler free. Not going to ruin anything for you because I am recommending you check out this movie. Let's get right into it. This Is Us. The movie called Us, directed by Jordan Peele, not the show This Is Us. Tired shtick. So I've enjoyed a lot of what Jordan Peele's had to offer in terms of movies for the past couple of years, ever since Keanu. He didn't direct that one, but he and Keegan, I believe, wrote it and had a lot to do with its eventual outcome. Get Out from 2 years ago was one of my favorite movies of that year, and I know I didn't give it a full video log or video review at the time, but I was able to shine and sing its praises in my end of the year list, and happy to do so. It's still one of my favorite new type of horror films to kind of come into play in the past couple of years. That alongside The Witch and Hereditary, a lot of really good, slow burn, angsty, tension-filled thrillers taking place. But we're here to talk about Us, his second big screen product, and for a sophomore attempt, it is very, very good. It is very solid. It's different from Get Out in some regards, and I still feel I kind of enjoy Get Out a little bit more than Us in the long run, but it's not taking away at all from the quality of Us. Us is just mired in really good slow burn horror aesthetic and atmosphere. The performances are really beautifully done and executed and captivating to watch, especially in our two leads, Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke. And while it might offer itself up to a case of don't overthink it too much itis after you see it, I feel it survives that whole overanalyzing and trying to poke logical holes in the storytelling. Not spoiling anything here because this is what is being displayed in a lot of the advertising. Us is about this family with Winston Duke and Lupita Nyong'o playing a married couple with their two kids, going to Santa Cruz beach for vacation and staying at their vacation house and meeting up with friends there and so forth. And then they eventually run into demented, twisted doubles of them. They're doppelgangers, so to speak. And shenanigans ensue. And that's all I'm gonna really tell you on that front. There are some really interesting developments. Some of them you can kind of anticipate or have a better understanding of perhaps after a second viewing. I kind of had a particular idea of what the big explanation for everything was going to be within the opening credits, and usually that'd be a bad thing, but it was just kind of this hunch that it was playing with me because there's a particular visual that takes place while the opening credits kind of unfold, and I'm like, this is a movie about doubles and things like that. I was starting to sort of connect the dots as to be like, I have a feeling of where they're going to be explaining why everything that is happening in the movie is happening. I feel that wasn't necessarily a big dramatic Shyamalan type of reveal. This concept certainly plays like perhaps something Shyamalan would have done after The Sixth Sense, except this is probably far better executed than what his attempt would have been, and also intentionally funny. This is a far more humorous type of horror film than what I was originally expecting. All that feels very purposeful. All that feels as though Jordan Peele knew that certain moments and certain character quirks and certain twists might play for laughs, because he is a comedy writer. He has to kind of understand when he's asking a particular character to say something and when he's okay with the performer delivering it in a particular way, there has to be some part of his comedic brain going someone's gonna get a laugh out of this. A lot of the humor comes from what I've kind of noticed in his film so far as sort of the hidden hostility in passive-aggressive suburban behavior. There are scenes where it's just the family is interacting with each other as any family would, and interacting with their friends on the beach and things like that, and talking like they would with acquaintances that they see every summer and so forth, where there's a lot of these just casual conversations that don't ultimately mean anything or contribute overall to, their relationship, but you just get the hint of like, ooh, that was sort of a catty thing to say, or, oh, that's sort of a snide remark that Tim Heidecker's offering to Winston Duke, even amongst the family members, where they're having, they're on the road and they're kind of saying, like, at one point Winston Duke's like, we don't have to talk to each other at a certain point, because he just gets into this squabbling with his family, and it's really well done. It's subtle enough that it's not like, oh, well, these are just annoying characters. It's like, no character is really annoying in this movie. They feel like they're fully developed and fully realized, and you buy that even though these are sort of horror tropes happening, Jordan Peele is aware that these are horror tropes, but he's going to make them at least as engaging and as interesting as possible by making the characters really strong. And that ultimately is the biggest strength of Us, is the characterization and the performances. Like, Lupita Nyong'o is by far the gleaming star of this whole film. She is, without a doubt, the anchor that everything has to kind of work around, and her performance, not only as the main character Adelaide, but also as Adelaide's doppelganger, is really effective. You could buy that she is this woman, this mother, this wife who, has tried very hard to build this life for herself, but there's this hint of darkness, there's this hint of something really traumatic that happened to her at a certain point, and it's tied to this trip, it's tied to going to this beach. And when you kind of see how things play out, again, it's the idea of, this is something that is kind of making itself known without being like blaringly obvious, as being like, pay attention to this for later. But when you get to kind of the last shoe dropping, you are kind of like, okay, this makes sense now. This makes sense now. And her performance really informs a lot of that. As much as she's a solid heroine to root for, there are moments where she can kind of turn it on a dime, so to speak, and really offer a different shade to this character. Her performance as the doppelganger, as I think the character's name is Red, is the stuff of some kind of nightmares. And I'm not talking like booga 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 scary clown jumping out at you out of the Jack-in-the-Box type of scary. Like, this isn't necessarily a jump scare movie at all. There are points where you do kind of flinch and you are startled, but those are earned because, again, what earns a good jump scare is the tension and the atmosphere building up to that moment. And this movie is very effective at that. And a lot of that has to do with just the performances, with Lupita just sitting in a chair across from herself, giving this death mask stare at her, on the verge of crying, but like crying with sick glee, and her voice is this guttural, like, once upon a time. And she holds that. You can understand very well like what the character's saying, but it is one of the most unsettling sounds to come out of a person. The entire time I'm there just watching the double, watching Red start to do sort of a monologue to her, I was sitting in my seat being like, it is so uncomfortable to listen to this person talk, but in the good sense, not in the sense of like, oh, when is this going to be over? More in the sense of like, you can't take your eyes off of her when she is in that mode and when she has to interact with her better half, quote unquote. While Lupita is kind of like the MVP all around in terms of performances in this movie, Winston Duke is the MVP for the comedic side of things, without a doubt. He is one of the doofiest, funniest horror dads I've seen in a while here, and he sells it. It doesn't take long for you to forget that this guy is a stone cold mountain of a guy in Black Panther as M'Baku. Give this guy Superman, as far as I'm concerned. He could play tough as nails, like broad-chested, standing up for truth and justice Superman, and then he can play Clark Kent, because he is Clark Kenting the hell out of this character. He is goofy, he thinks he's in touch with his kids, he dabs in the background, and it's embarrassing but hilarious to watch. He is aloof as to what is going on with Adelaide, but he's not unsympathetic. Like, it's not that he's like a nuisance or annoying at all. He is really funny, but he's like so well performed and so endearing as a character that you don't want to see something horrible happen to him, even if he is kind of stupid. There's a cool like payoff in terms of something that's mentioned between him and Tim Heidecker earlier on in the movie, because they're boat enthusiasts, even though the joke is Winston Duke's character really doesn't know anything about boating or yachting. And so there's a payoff with regards to like what you need to come prepared with on a boat, like flares, life preservers, things like that. And when it happens, you're like, oh, you see like the object in question being displayed, you're like, oh, here comes a payoff. And it doesn't pay off in the way you're expecting it to. But the character's just like, oh, well, like, oh, shucks, what am I going to do? It's truly a very comedic, but very appealing performance from him. Overall, the family is a really well-acted troupe. Lupita and Winston are great kind of matriarchal and patriarchal leaders for this clan. The kids are really good, both as themselves and as their doubles. A lot of the characters have, you know, a one-to-one equivalency in terms of the doubles, or I think they call them the tethered in this story. The kids are really good as just being, you know, these kind of put out kids to this family, but also as these really like just unnerving like phantoms of a human being they're supposed to be. It's all in the performances and the ambiance of the movie that a lot of this flourishes. The lighting is really effective. Sometimes it's just dark enough that you really can't make out what exactly is like behind a character until it's too late. Other times it's like that idea of there's this figure behind you. It's obscured enough, but it's a slow burn and reveal to see what it is, but you're dreading that reveal. Like I said, the concept is a great concept to work with. It's a great idea for a plot. You have to kind of leave a lot of your logical mind at the door when you go into this. It's kind of something along the lines of what I mentioned when it came to A Quiet Place last year, in that if you start to take apart aspects of this plot and try to logisticize or rationalize the effectiveness of this in compared to, say, a real world setting, you're going to drive yourself crazy in that sense. You have to abandon kind of that and just give in sort of to the tension that is created in the visuals, in the performances, in the reveals, which, like I said, are set up pretty well in the movie itself, but you're not aware of them being set up until they are finally revealed to you, and then you kind of have that aha moment. And while that might not satisfy a lot of people in repeat viewings, it's something that I've been able to access pretty well, like I said, with these slow burn suspense thrillers that have been kind of cropping up in the past couple of years, like Get Out, like Hereditary. These are some films that, even though I know what's coming, even though I know already what the twist is, what the final, like I said, the final shoe dropping is going to be, I still anticipate it with the same amount of dread and anxiousness that I had going in the first time. And may I say that this is one of those rare occasions where I actually appreciated that the audience was a little bit more uproarious and outspoken this time around, because it just fed into the kind of good feeling I came out of the movie with. Good feeling in the sense that, like, man, that was actually kind of a fun experience. Not necessarily like, I have faith in humanity, because this movie isn't about having faith in humanity. There was a moment that happens in the movie, I'm not going to tell you which moment it is, but there was a moment where a lot of the crowd at this point had been pretty much a good crowd, laughing when Winston Duke says or does something funny or buffoonish, yelping a little bit at certain scenes that are creepy or unnerving. But there is a point in this movie where something happens kind of close to the end of the film, and a good 75% of my audience, me included, all at once, as if with one voice, collectively said, "Oh, hell no." And it was kind of this amazing moment where a few of us just kind of looked around at each other and laughed a little bit, because we're like, right? Same wavelength. We're all on the same wavelength. Great. I'm glad. Congratulations, Jordan Peele. I feel that serves as a great result of your efforts. If you can get an audience to collectively exclaim the same sentiment at the same exact time without any prior rehearsal, My hat's off to you on that, sir. You did your job. There's a good sense of humor throughout the whole movie, like I said before. Perhaps even a little bit, like I said, more intentionally than Get Out. It plays more like a Key and Peele sketch, one of the darker Key and Peele sketches that they used to do, because the movie has these moments where it will kind of leave you on a demented but kind of amusing note. The movie itself kind of ends on a very demented but amusing note, and that's very symbolic of quite a few sketches that Key and Peele did in their tenure on that show, and which makes me wonder, like, I wonder if Jordan had a lot more to do with those particular sketches, like where he's playing an all-access cock blocker to Keegan-Michael Key when they're out looking for women at the bar or something, because that sketch came to mind immediately while watching this, because that sketch takes an absurd but really dark turn, and I kind of love it. If I had to say there's one kind of aspect that didn't work for me 100%, there are points where it feels like it's getting a little too grandiose for its own good, that the absurdity begins to outweigh the horrificness of the circumstances. But then it'll cut to Lupita just giving that deathly gaze, or saying something really disturbing in that voice, or it'll cut to the little kid with the mask just crawling around on the floor in super speed. It'll cut to the doppelgangers of other people like just going like across the Bay Area, which is a haunting sound. It's a solid horror film that's got a great sense of humor about it without being like too laugh out loud funny. Like it reins it in just enough, but it knows that it can be amusing when it, you know, especially when it gets to certain horror tropes, and how it makes those horror tropes that we've seen again and again feel fresh and new is that it adds a little bit of its self-awareness, but also makes the characters really sympathetic and really endearing. I'm really curious to see what Peele does next. I wouldn't be that heartbroken if Jordan Peele stuck with original concepts from here on out. He seems to be doing pretty well with them, and they achieve a very good balance. I kind of prefer Get Out a little bit more over this. Get Out feels like a little bit more of a complete narrative overall, but Us, it's got a great kind of meditation and theme on coping with our darker impulses and being upfront and honest about confronting them. It's good for just unsettling you for a while. So if you feel like getting unsettled, Us is good for what ails you.